How we doing today, YouTube? Today, I want to talk about a topic that I feel like is swept under the rug far too often. And it's swept under the rug because if it was addressed the way it should be, a lot of corporations would lose a whole lot of money. And that topic, as I'm sure you have read in the title, would be concussions. And if they are more serious, then we treat them. Now, don't get me wrong. Concussions are treated with more seriousness today than in recent years. For example, in 1964, NFL running back Jim Brown had suffered a concussion in a pileup on the field and had to sit on the bench as he was in great pain and just wasn't feeling like himself. And when he decided to sit the rest of the game out instead of being taken seriously, Brown was accused of gold bricking, which is a term used to describe the act of faking an injury to get out of work. And the coach even suggested that Brown was swindling his employer. But we know today that that was not the case. This is one example among many of us historically not taking concussions for what they really are. And don't get me wrong, we have absolutely made leaps and bounds in understanding what concussions are and what they affect since then. But today, I want to go deeper. I want to make an argument here today that we haven't gone far enough in understanding concussions and their effects on the human brain and their effects on the actions of the person thereafter. Concussions are so traumatic to the brain that not only does it have immediate side effects, it has delayed and long-term effects on the brain and the body. And not only does it have physical effects like headache, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, loss of consciousness, fatigue, blurred vision, sensitivity to light and noise, ringing in the ears, and balance problems. But it also has cognitive effects, such as feeling foggy or confused, difficulty concentrating, memory problems, and delayed responsiveness, and feeling overwhelmed. And lastly, and I think most importantly, you have emotional effects, such as irritability, anxiety, mood swings, depression, PTSD, personality changes, lack of impulse control, and hyper-aggressiveness. I feel like these emotional effects have been showed to us in daily life many times, and here I will now list some examples. You have NFL players who most have had a concussion, the most recent numbers being 50% in 2010, and in 2016 it was found that 40% of former players have traumatic brain injuries. Now, let's take a look at Aaron Hernandez. He had multiple concussions leading to CTE that led him down a terrible path to his demise. Highest KD in the NFL, by the way. And that's not the only example I have. I have one that's a little more recent. On April 7th, 2021, former NFL cornerback Phillip Adams, 32, shot himself in the head after murdering physician Robert Leslie, 70, his wife Barbara, and the couple's grandchildren. He also fatally shot two HVAC technicians who were working at the victim's home in Rock Hill, South Carolina. An autopsy found Adams had severe stage 2 CTE, which is a degenerative brain disease, in both of his frontal lobes. And the final example, coming from the NFL, is Henry Ruggs III. So, in January of 2020, he is placed on concussion protocol. And then on November 2nd, 2021, he gets in a car accident after being intoxicated twice the legal limit, or 0.16, while driving 150 miles per hour, killing 23-year-old Tina Tintor. I'm not giving an excuse for this tragedy, but this is an example of poor decision making and poor impulse control. The next example is probably the most tragic example, and this example is of Chris Benoit. He was a professional wrestler for WWE who did amazing work in the ring, but because of that amazing work, he suffered multiple concussions and was known for taking chair shots to the back of the head. A lot of people already know the tragic and fatal story of Chris Benoit, as this happened a while ago. and a lot of people hate him for what he did in the final hours of his life. And it's blamed a lot on him and steroids and roid rage. But I know better than that. I know, once again, concussions are to blame. And once again, this is why I feel concussions are so much more serious than we're giving them credit for. Neurosurgeon Dr. Julian Bales described Chris Benoit's brain as showing severe damage resembling the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient, with damage to all 4 brain lobes and the brainstem, and confirmed the presence of severe CTE. This perfectly fits with the change in his behavior and the anxiety and the depression he was suffering from. Ultimately, he took the life of his son and his wife and himself, which is something that Chris would have never done if he was in his right mind. But he wasn't in his right mind because his mind had been damaged by repeated concussions. Now, I would like to speak to you guys about a modern day example of concussions causing somebody to act out of character, to act in a way they would never act if they had not had this concussion. It is the 21st or 22nd of August 2025, and Raja Jackson is streaming a sparring session live on kick.com. When out of nowhere, he gets rocked with a nasty head kick that almost puts him straight to sleep, and he is seen stumbling out of the camera frame. He has just been given a concussion. Fast forward to Saturday, August 23rd, 2025. Raja Jackson is once again streaming on kick.com. He states that he isn't feeling very good from receiving the concussion, but he was invited by his friend and trainer to a pro wrestling event, and he was told that he was allowed to stream and was even invited backstage before the show to be able to meet and hang out with some of the wrestlers. AJ, his trainer, had informed all the wrestlers beforehand that his buddy Raja was coming and he was bringing a camera, but he was not a worker, he was not a wrestler, and to leave him alone. This is per AJ's interview on YouTube, where he also mentions that he just recently lost his job over all of this. Well, the hangout session gets ruined when a wrestler named Psycho Stu approaches Raja aggressively and almost as if to intimidate him. But the intimidation tactic fails, as Raja isn't even facing Psycho Stu because he's talking with another wrestler asking where his friend is. Well, Psycho Stu hears Raja ask the question and replies with, "Oh, don't worry about him. You should be worried about me." To which Raja turns around and replies, "Oh, who are you?" Psycho Stu replies and says, "Oh, you don't know me?" And Raja replies with, "Hell nah." To which Stu grabs the beer he had been drinking and bashes it against the side of Raja's head, who once again has a concussion. This angers Raja, as it would anyone else, and he then goes to remove his bag to defend himself, and he's being pushed and held back, to which Stu replies, "Oh, you're not gonna sell it? You're not gonna sell it?" He says this twice, to which he is reminded by everyone else around him. He says, "Hey, Raja's not a worker. He's not a worker. You messed up." Tensions eventually cool, and the promoter decides that this is a good thing. We can make a storyline out of it. And Raja should run into the ring to get his receipt back. A receipt in professional wrestling is when a wrestler delivers a retaliation to an opponent who was too rough, careless, or broke the agreed upon rules of the match by being stiff. Stu then apologizes, shakes Raja's hand, and claims he didn't know that Raja wasn't a worker and that he saw the camera and was just on. But you can see by Raja's body language that he still is agitated by what has happened, and he's not going for any of it. Which is honestly understandable. From his point of view, He has just been attacked and then told he can't defend himself and made to look like a bitch, in his own words. And the only way to prove that he isn't is to get a receipt in the ring, even though AJ says he told everyone that Raja was coming and he wasn't a worker. Here is where my theory comes into play. Raja already has a concussion. Then he gets hit in the head, re-agitating his injury that was already bothering him, which most likely further damaged the areas in his brain that oversee emotional regulation as well as impulse control. Now take that and add it to the chat rage baiting him for 40 minutes straight, and I believe that's how you get Raja, a good kid, making the worst mistake of his life. And I honestly think if he didn't have the concussion, he doesn't take things too far, he goes in, he gets his receipt, and we aren't even talking about Raja Jackson. And that's why, in conclusion, I believe that yes, we have made large progress on concussion research and treatment, but I think the real and dangerous effects of concussions have been downplayed. And they have been downplayed to save corporations like the NFL and the UFC from being outright banned. And if I'm being 100% honest, I don't want to see the NFL or the UFC banned, but I do want to see the NFL and the UFC step up for their players and fighters. The NFL should step up and provide better protective equipment for their players. And the UFC should step up and provide better pay and benefits like health insurance for their fighters. So after each fight, a fighter can go to the doctor and get their brain checked and their body checked and make sure that their brain is good and their body is good. Could you imagine how awesome it would be if fighters were able to catch injuries quicker? If they were able to catch the injury before their next fight or during their training camp? If they were able to know, hey, I've got something tore on the inside, or I've got an issue with my brain, or this or that, then they wouldn't have to pull out of fights when they discover the injury 3, 4, 5 weeks later on in their fight camp. There's a lot of benefits that could come out of the UFC offering health insurance and benefits to their fighters. Anyways, that's about enough yapping from me. If you made it this far, thank you. I appreciate you supporting the channel by watching my video all the way through. I have been Ghostmon, aka the Concussion Sage. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.